This is the Extensionists, Conversations with Great Thinkers in Agriculture. I'm Toban Dyck.
And I'm Jay Whetter. Hey, Toban.
Hey, Jay.
We have a guest today.
We do.
I've never met or even heard of Meaghan Seagrave before. How did you meet her? How did you find her?
couple of things. Two-part question in response. That's for our producer. She loves my two-part questions. Meaghan can't be the first one that you've never heard of before. There's been other guests. I mean, probably most of them you have. Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there have been others. Yeah, there have.
But
yeah.
this one stood out as kind of like, how does Toban know this person? What's the connection? And it's an interesting story.
Yeah. It's like Nicolas Cage. Like, why am I not in this movie? You know that SNL skit?
Yes.
How do I not know this person? This amazing brain. How have I never met her before? Am I not connected to industry within Canada? No, I'm not. But anyway.
Speaking of which, I saw Nicolas Cage is in like a new surfing movie, which is just like, it's so bizarre. Like, anyway. I'm not going to watch it, I don't think. Yeah, it was bizarre. So Burr Forest Group's project manager, Ashley Robinson, we were searching for kind of companies that get cluster or organizations that get cluster funding through the federal government. And so, we came across get this right.
Yep. Bioindustrial Innovation Canada.
Bioindustrial Innovation Canada. We came across them. And so Google search, Meaghan Seagrave's name came up. It was a cold call and gave her a shout. We had a great meeting.
Phone call or email?
So now, because we were talking about cold calls, so I went with call.
Yeah.
I do both. So I'm of that kind of,
Yeah.
I may have emailed first because it was probably a day where I was emailing a lot of people, but I'm not opposed to picking up the phone. And I do that once in a while for sure. And there's value in that.
Oh,
for
yeah.
Sure.
Well, I mean, this is a classic example, but what other values? When you think of the value, what are you thinking of?
Well, so the value is she got back to me quite promptly and was interested in chatting. And then we chatted and we had such an interesting conversation about what she does and who she is and what she represents for the industry, which, really, really, really excited to get into. And it was one of those conversations where you think everybody needs to hear this.
Yeah.
Like it's too much for me to take in. I was just being like awash in this new perspective on something that I feel like I know. I mean, not so well. I mean, not perfectly. I know quite well the ag industry and kind of its machinations, right? But this was like, holy cow! This has been going on all the time. Like, this is happening right now.
So just kind of cold research and then a cold call. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Good lesson for us.
You never know what you're going to get.
We're going to find lots of future guests this way. I know. So let's get on with the conversation. We're the Extensionists, and we are going to chat with Meaghan Seagrave.
Enjoy.
Hey there, listeners. If you're enjoying the conversations here on the Extensionists, you will probably love to get our newsletter.
Yeah, it's the best way to stay connected with us, with Jay and myself, yours truly. I'm excited about the newsletter, to be honest with you, because I think...
Why are you excited?
Well, so many of our guests have...
Sorry. Why are you excited about it?
Say that differently, Jay. So many of our guests they say so many things of interest, right? And I feel like the newsletter will be a great way to share that with our listeners.
Like quick take-homes?
Yeah.
Summaries?
Yeah, absolutely.
One-liners?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think about each guest, we could probably write a whole bunch of articles from each of our guests, right? So to give our newsletter subscribers like summaries of the key takeaways of these things plus information on upcoming guests, all the listeners have to do is go to theextensionists.com and follow the prompts to sign up for the newsletter. I think it'll be great.
All right, our guest today is Meaghan Seagrave, who's the Executive Director of Bioindustrial Innovation Canada. And before we get into Bioindustrial Innovation Canada and chemistry and extension. Meaghan, we know that you are a traveler. One of the things you like to do is travel. What's the favorite? I'm going to ask you the favorite place you've ever been, and I know you're going to think it's like 25 different things. But when someone asks you that question, what's the first image that pops into your head?
The Port of Rotterdam, which probably sounds like an odd response, but I really like the industrial nature of ports. I like the industrial nature of just industrial economies. And Europe is filled with them. Belgium, very industrial economy. Love traveling through Belgium because you've got this old world, old city. You're wandering through the streets. You might as well be in Paris. And then the next minute you're along a riverfront and it's heavy industry. And that to me is really cool. I like driving the highways and the back countries of these countries and these regions, and stopping at biogas plants and knocking on the door and going, "Hey, hi, I'm a lowly Canadian and this looks really cool. Can you tell me about it?"
Tell me about your biogas.
Yeah. So have you done that?
I have done that.
Can you share a story where you just like walked up to a place that you thought would be interesting?
There's a large sugar cooperative and factory in the Netherlands called Suiker Unie. It's all sugar beet based. They do it's a massive biorefinery. So they do everything from biofuels to biogas to bio-based products and sugar. The same way that we would have like Rogers Sugar or Atlantic Sugar here in Canada, they do sugar from sugar beets. And a couple of colleagues and I had an extra day, so we rented a car and started driving around and literally drove up to this Suiker Unie plant. Didn't know what it was because it didn't have a sign outside of it, but it was massive. So we drive up to the gate, and I roll down the window, and this security guard is like, in Dutch, he's like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Hi, we're Canadians, just curious what this is." I said we were out for a drive and wanted to know. And he's like, "Oh, it's a sugar beet plant." And of course I was like, "No shit." Any chance we could meet someone? And they were like, "No, we're closed for retrofit, and they take like 2 weeks or 3 weeks every year where they shut the plant down, they clean everything, they do all the maintenance and upkeep." And I was like, "Oh, that's really too bad." I said, "Is there anyone here that we could just talk to? We've come all the way from Canada." And
just to see Suiker Unie.
Well, maybe not for that, but so he makes a few phone calls, and then the gate opens. And we drive in, and this gentleman, one of the VPs, comes down, and he's like, "What are you here for?" And I said, "Well, actually, we just happened to be out for a drive and happened to buy. We are chemists and engineers, but we're from Canada, and this is the area we play in." And he's like, "Oh, do you want a tour?" And I said, "Absolutely." So he made us lunch. We had a tour. We had coffee. We were there for about 3 hours, and it was brilliant. And all it was, "I wonder what this is. This looks really cool. Let's knock on the door and see who answers." So.
What a great tourist approach. Oh, so just back to the Port of Rotterdam.
Yeah, I'm curious too. Yeah.
Like what is, I've been through Rotterdam. I've been to Amsterdam, but Rotterdam is not necessarily high on the list of tourist places for people, but it is for you because you love ports. So describe for me what the Port of Rotterdam looks like.
So the Port of Rotterdam is probably the second largest port in the world, second or third, and continuously growing. The interesting thing about the Dutch is, the country of the Netherlands started off this big, and as they use their technologies for water displacement, it's grown to triple its size. So it's actually a physically growing country, and consequently the Port of Rotterdam is actually growing in size. And it was probably the world's largest petroleum-based port, and they're now about 30% bio-based, and they're moving towards being completely sustainable and net zero by 2050, if not sooner. So massive transition. They are also the one of the number one ports where Canadian biomass, primarily in the form of chips and pellets, is exported into and then redistributed into Turkey and the UK and other regions. But the other interesting thing about the Port of Rotterdam is they are all about sustainability. They have a massive roadmap that they are building on to net zero and sustainability, and it's been underway for 20 plus years. So we as Canadians are far behind, have a lot to learn, but they also reach out. So they have partnerships with probably half a dozen ports and regions across Canada to share their learnings, share their best practices, and share what they've done, with the hopes that they can develop additional partnerships here in Canada and North America. Yeah.
Do you get a sense that we're listening here in Canada?
There are some regions that are taking steps and initiatives to do that. I wouldn't say all of them. We shackle and handcuff a lot of our ports because they are economic drivers and naturally economic developers, but that's not the mandates that they've been given. So they don't often have the tools and the resources to play that role, and there's an expectation from the regions and the provinces that they're in that they do play that role. So it's about connecting those dots and understanding how we can better support the opportunities to align across sectors, industries, utilize the assets that we have.
You said the ports, their mandates aren't economic development in Canada.
No, they're not.
What are their mandates? Just to move stuff around?
Yeah, essentially, to support the leaseholders and those industry players and stakeholders who are utilizing those assets to do trade. And that's it.
One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about later on, which we'll get to, which is really exciting because I love that you think about this, is Canada's productivity issue. And part of it this is one example where we kind of shackle institutions and industries with, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You just do that. We'll leave innovation up to someone else, and usually it's nobody. But anyway, so this will be exciting. But before we get there, we need to know about what Bioindustrial Innovation Canada is. I've never heard of it.
I attempted to explain it to Jay, but I think we should leave that explanation out of this podcast entirely and go with yours.
Yeah.
We're kind of a complex organization. We get siloed as a bit of an accelerator. Our focus is green chemistry. We've been around since 2008, started in Sarnia, Ontario, and have expanded nationally to build out additional bio-based or industrial bio-based clusters. We develop programming and support early stage, and by early stage I mean like pre-seed and seed investments into bio-based technologies and technologies that fit along a green chemistry value chain. So think about any product that gets created from the oil and gas sector. You've got fuels and energy, you've got primary chemicals, polymers and chemicals, semi-finished goods, finished goods, etc., all along that value chain. All of that can actually be displaced or replaced by bio-based inputs coming from agriculture, coming from forestry, and in some cases even marine and fisheries, biomass and feedstocks. So we play along that value chain and develop programs to help those early stage companies that are building those technologies to defossilize or displace those fossil-based inputs and decarbonize across industries. Programs that will help them overcome commercialization hurdles and become investment ready and bring investment into Canada to allow those innovations to scale.
Which is maybe another reason why you like the Port of Rotterdam, because you said it's 30% already bio-based energy there.
Yeah. They are essentially defossilizing.
Yeah. What is green chemistry, and why? What is it about chemistry in particular that's so important? What is it about that science that is key here?
So when we think about like oil and gas is all chemistry. It's chemistry and engineering. and chemical engineering, a combination of the two. The foundation of Canada's economy is mixed, and it's oil and gas, ag, forestry, fisheries, and marine. That's essentially it. We really don't have much else. When you start to look at things like automotive and aerospace and IT, they are fractional compared to those industries. Green chemistry is taking everything that we currently do with a non-sustainable source, which is pumping oil out of the ground, and all of that making its way into a multitude of sectors and industries across our country, whether it's energy, transportation, automotive, aerospace, food, construction, you name it, and displacing those inputs with green-based primary chemicals, green-based energy, green-based polymers, green-based goods, products, semi-finished goods, you name it. So green chemistry is really just about defossilization and displacement of those existing fossil-based incumbents. Many folks don't really understand the amount of fossil-based products that are in our society. Likely the couch you're sitting on contains significant amount of fossil-based inputs. The clothes you're wearing, the microphones you're speaking into, the carpet underneath your feet, the walls around your building, the paints that coat them. So the technologies that we support are about identification and validation of technologies that are going to displace and remove or displace the incumbents of those fossil-based inputs. So using the resource-based sectors that we have, which is agriculture and forestry for the most part, and a little bit on the marine and fisheries side.
How closely do you get involved in those projects, those innovations? How hands-on are you?
We are very hands-on, so we're not your typical accelerator. We're not going to help anyone. I shouldn't say we're not going to, but we don't traditionally help people build a business plan or do their market intelligence. We can support that, but that's not our area of expertise. We are chemists and engineers and chemical engineers for the most part. So we're good at identification and validation, and then understanding what it's going to take to build and scale that technology and turn it into a pilot or a demonstration or a scaled up commercial-based facility. And then we embed our resources. So my staff get embedded into these companies in roles where they help them overcome those commercialization hurdles that we know they're going to encounter, because we all have experience building these types of technologies.
Well, that's really interesting. So you're embedded the way the CFIA embeds a vet into major animal processing facilities. So and is this a long-term embedment, if that's a word? Like, what is?
Yeah.
And how are they involved in as much as the company wants them to be, or are they really pushing hard on some initiatives and sort of leading the company?
So it can be any or all of the above. It is really up to the company. We don't support where we're not.
So on that note, then, does the company phone you and say, "Could you please embed somebody? We're trying to build something here," or how does that happen?
So it's usually an introduction by a third party, whether it's a government agency, maybe it's the NRC, maybe it's just a colleague within another organization. We get an introduction into these companies, and the first thing we do is look over the technology and spend a lot of time with the developers or the founders of the technology, so that we understand it. And if we believe that it has legs from a technical perspective, we are able to validate it, and we think that it's got promise and opportunity from a Canadian perspective, keeping that IP here, the opportunity to adopt or adapt that IP for existing economic opportunities, regardless of where they are in Canada. And then we work with those founders to help them understand the hurdles that we think that they are going to encounter as they start to scale up. So a good analogy would be baking a cake. If you are baking a cake at home, maybe it's a box cake, you follow the instructions, everything works out perfectly. You go to double that cake. It may be 2 boxes, but the instructions are going to change because the chemistry changes as you scale things up. So maybe the first box required 2 eggs. You add a second box, you may only require 1 egg, or you may just require a yolk and 2 whites. So those are the types of hurdles that these companies encounter as they begin to scale those technologies. And we essentially help with validating what those hurdles are going to be and then helping them overcome them. We don't handhold per se, but we are there to support, we're there to advise, we're there to share our own knowledge and expertise, bring others around the table. As a team, the other sort of interesting play is we get together every couple of weeks as a team. We talk about what we're working on. It's a cone of silence, but it's also an opportunity for everyone to say, we're running into this hurdle, or I've been asked to build something, and I've never built anything like this before. Has anyone else built one? Oh, others around the table put their hand up and say, oh, I built one, or I've got some designs that might help. And if you want to pass by any drawings, or if you want me to help do any calculations, then we freely sort of share that knowledge and expertise around the table so that those embedded assets all go back to the companies to relay and support the initiatives that they are taking on.
So in your experience with all the people that you've worked with, all the companies and startups and whomever you've worked with, are there quite a few shared hurdles? Or are there?
Yeah.
Can you walk in and kind of guess what their hurdles will be?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a guess per se. Every one of them is going to be slightly different. But when you've scaled, if you're talking about metallurgical technologies, or if you're talking about technologies, they're all, everything has kind of a chemistry base, or at least where we play has a chemistry base. So you can see what is going to be needed and likely what is going to happen. You still have to walk through those stages and those steps to validate that at each one of those stages. This is nothing like, creating an app in your mom's basement while you eat pizza, and 12 months down the road you are revenue generating, and 72 months down the road you are selling your company for a couple million to a group outside. This is heavy capex, hard tech, significant commercialization hurdles, displacement of existing incumbents. So you've got industries that may not be open initially to adoption and adaptation of these technologies because we haven't had the urgencies within Canada to push those industries to change. But there's an absolute need, and then the ability to kind of connect that back to our resource-based sectors, to me, is just a no-brainer when we talk, or I say we, when Carney talks about, the one Canadian economy and nation-building projects. This is it, and this is what we've been doing for the last 15 years.
Yeah, and do you feel that you have a good sense of all, you talk about your interest in components, at an early stage in your career and how they all play together. In your mind, do you have a pretty good picture of how all these components in Canada work together and how that all looks, how that landscape looks?
I think so. I would never propose to be an expert at anything. I think I'm a little bit of a generalist in the true sense. But if we think about, I talked about silos and mandates, and you asked that question early on. If we go back to our funding programs, whether they're provincial or federal, they're all siloed, right? And they're siloed either by sector or they're siloed by industry. When you're dealing with value chains and the technologies that we deal with, they don't fit into any of those silos. They tend to be cross-sectoral in terms of the feedstock opportunities. They also tend to be cross-industrial in terms of their nature and applications. So an opportunity that may exist for lightweighting could also be beneficial to construction, could be beneficial to automotive, could be beneficial to aerospace and defense. Yet, when we look at the way programs get funded, both provincially and federally, AFC deals with anything starting with ag, but they don't have a mandate for economic development. NRCan deals with anything starting with a forest resource, but they don't have mandate for economic development. ISET has the mandate for economic development, but the RDC, RDAs across the country, the regional development agencies across the country, all have their own focus areas, and most of them don't touch ag, forestry, fisheries, and marine because they believe those fall under AFC, NRCan, and DFO. So you've got these big disconnects, right? And then you've got these technologies that end up falling between the cracks because they don't fit. It's that square peg round hole kind of analogy. Yet these are opportunities that can industrially transform so many of probably all of our manufacturing industries in this country.
Well, you're from New Brunswick, Meaghan.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of you talked about displacing incumbents, and I think about Irving Oil's refinery at St. John, and then the green chemistry, biofuels. Are they at all? I mean, this is my mind is kind of racing around this issue, but so does Irving have any vested interest or interest in pursuing biofuels? If not, then we've got to ramp up biofuels to the stage where they're displacing Irving. And then so just to round out the scenario a little bit more, who on this, you just mentioned these government agencies. So the biofuels fall under agriculture.
They fall under NRCan, actually.
And they fall under NRCan. Okay. Wow. All right. So there's nobody who really takes full responsibility, or if it's really that siloed, is NRCan trickling down into the agriculture industry? You're shaking your head for people who are only listening.
Yeah.
So how do we walk through this massive issue in Canada?
Yeah. What's the solution?
How do you push us toward a solution in that scenario?
So you've got a handful of questions in in there. With regards to Irving, they're actually a really interesting. I think they're a really interesting organization and company, quite closed and siloed in and of themselves, but they're an international trading entity. So they already trade in ethanol. They trade in renewable fuels. They trade in all of those. So they're fully aware of what that landscape looks like and the opportunity and the future of oil and gas. They're looking 25 and 30 years out every single day. The other opportunity around them and their assets is refineries are refineries. Whether they are fossil-based or whether they are bio-based, they're refineries. So there are residuals and waste streams that refinery in St. John creates that could be utilized and brought into other industrial-based processes. St. John is a massive energy hub opportunity. The Irving's own mining assets, they own oil refinery assets, they own renewable fuels assets, bringing those all to bear, or at least understanding how they're all interconnected, or the opportunity to connect the dots between them and use them as inward investment attraction for additional technologies maybe that could leverage the gray hydrogen coming off the refinery, like volumes and volumes of gray hydrogen that could then be utilized for energy sources or gas fermentation capture, which reduces their, greenhouse gas emissions and creates additional chemical resources that could then be sold under their banner. It's just a matter of looking at it in a different aspect, I guess, coming at it with a different lens.
So maybe Irving is a bad example in that they're already quite integrated. But I'm sorry, you're speaking like a chemist and you're over my head often. What is gray hydrogen? Just to do a little sidebar.
It's just plus what its source is coming from. So because it's coming out of an oil refinery, it's not going to be considered green, which means it's not
Okay.
coming from a renewable source.
Okay.
But they're producing significant amounts of it, so why not utilize it? Instead of wasting it, right? Utilize it as an input, and to reduce the energy consumption of another industry player, or to reduce the energy load on another industry player. Co-location.
Okay, again, I think of Irving, and I'm thinking, how does government help or get out of the way and let them just run with it? Because you said they're 25, 30 years into the future, which is probably way ahead of anyone in agriculture and definitely way ahead of anyone in government. So there's that question. But maybe we could park that, because I want then go back to this agriculture issue, innovations within agriculture, especially in the green fuels. Do we have a government situation that is hampering potential progress there because the jurisdictions are overlapping and siloed and not streamlined enough?
I think we are. You've hit on a couple of points. So we're at this inflection point. If we think about, Carney talking about a one Canadian economy, nation-building projects, but agriculture doesn't usually fit in to those because agriculture is funded by province, a little bit by region. So it's again, you've got these borders that we're dealing with. The other hurdle is we haven't had any urgency in this country, right? We've got 100 million acres of agricultural land. We've got like 500,000 hectares of forestry in this province, in this country, that we can leverage, but a lot of it goes unleveraged, underutilized. I mean, just the province of New Brunswick, I think it was 2022, they identified 1 million acres of agricultural land that had been abandoned, just in a short period of time, and more of it was being taken out of production because they just didn't have the farmers to farm it. Well, we look at these as hurdles, but I mean the rest of the world looks at this as opportunities. We have no shortage of land. We have no shortage of water. Maybe Alberta, a little bit drought. But apart from that, we have all of the assets. And frankly, from a climate perspective, I think you're going to see Nova Scotia and New Brunswick slowly turn into the next Napa Valley with regards to the agricultural crops that they're going to be able to grow, because the weather here is changing so much and so fast. But we're not being impacted, so we don't have the same urgencies that California is suffering, that Texas is suffering. I mean, that Europe is suffering. We're not dealing with the policies that Europe has to deal with in terms of the Green Deal, which is restricting what they can plant, where they can plant it, and how much they can plant. Same thing on the forestry side. We don't have policies around deforestation here. Frankly, we only harvest 2% of our allowable cut in this country, across the country. 2% of the allowable cut, and the allowable cut is less than 20% of our cut. So, we're talking very small numbers, which represent opportunities for inward investment. They represent opportunities for existing industries to come and play, or existing industries that are here to invest and grow. If we could get our act together across the siloed departments, ensure that they all have either similar mandates, or we create nation-building projects that allow for those cross-sectoral and cross-industrial opportunities. Maybe the way that ISED had approached the superclusters, a decade ago. Yeah, just a thought.
Yeah, are you hoping to bring some of this into the new ag policy framework as those discussions start in the next year or two?
I feel like we have been talking about this since about 2017. Same thing over and over again. And to shift within a single department is a very difficult thing to do. AFC is a difficult department to make anything happen in. They're great. They've got great researchers. They are very knowledgeable, experienced staff, but big cogs. And to try and get them to shift and change, even around those policy frameworks.
But you said earlier, AAFC has no mandate for economic development, which is just, and I totally understand that and believe that. Obviously, when it's not a matter of belief, it's a fact. But that's very interesting. It's not our mandate, so we're not going to bother with that. And then why would anybody take initiative? Because there's probably not a lot of appreciation for initiative within some agencies. You said something earlier, and I wrote down no urgency. I'm not sure that's the right word you use, but why Canada is not innovating. And was that the phrase?
Yep.
No urgency?
No urgency or lack of urgency.
Right. So that, and you gave the Napa Valley example of how the climate change in the Annapolis Valley or parts of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, could be growing grapes and producing wine. But why bother? Like, why would we need to do that? Like, we could, but who cares? Like, we're happy with what we're doing now. Like, so I want to kind of evolve into the extension communications part of this, and we have been talking about it because this is all about the silos. But how in the world do we move from complacency, which seems to be a Canadian trait in large parts of the population, complacency to urgency? Like, how do we get at the root of Canadianness when it comes to industrial development?
Yeah, and what's the opportunity for, you have Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Annapolis Valley, great opportunity there potentially. What's the opportunity for producers here, say even in the prairies? Is there a way, farmers can modernize or that's imputing too much, but change anyway.
So, from an urgency perspective, or to bring urgency to me causes industry to change, or forces industry to change, and we've had the kick in the pants from the U.S. or the administration in the U.S. Right? Trump imposing tariffs, not just on the goods that we are importing, whether it's raw resources or whether it's an entire industry like automotive. That kick in the pants has forced our producers, whether they're ag, forestry, marine fisheries, to look at additional markets or to look at different markets from the U.S. Europe is probably the most, I guess, the closest market to us that we would look at from an export or partnership opportunity perspective. Europe has a lot of hurdles when it comes to land, when it comes to cost of energy, when it comes to the types of goods that they allow into their country. So that is going to force our industries to change the way they do things. Hence, the urgency is coming, and it's starting to push things like our producers and our industries and our manufacturers. So the exporting into the U.S., I don't want to say it's been easy, but it's a known exercise. We've been doing it for 100 years. They are a major export partner. Exporting into Europe is somewhat known, but becoming more and more fraught with hurdles. And those hurdles have all been related to the Green Deal. Policy coming down from the European Union that has said if you cannot demonstrate the carbon intensity of your product and that it is equivalent or lower carbon intensity to existing products here in Europe, we're going to tariff you on those imports. That's everything. Doesn't matter if it's an raw agricultural product being exported or if it's, I don't know, a computer or a piece of equipment that we are exporting or a piece of furniture. Our manufacturers and our producers, frankly, don't have a lot of experience doing that. They haven't been forced to do it. They haven't even had to really think about it. But little by little, these are becoming evident hurdles. And as economic developers, we need to help our SMEs and our M&Es understand that there is a great opportunity, and we are very well aligned with Europe, and we can insulate ourselves from that U.S. economy by exporting and creating partnerships with Europe, but we need to understand what they need. So we need to help ensure that our producers are using, lower carbon inputs. They're putting in play technologies or adopting technologies that are going to increase their productivity and, frankly, overall global competitiveness in order to be successful in that market or those new markets, those new European markets. So that kick in the pants that has happened, the ability to, or the need to insulate our economy and mitigate against the trade tariffs that we are feeling from the U.S. and Trump is forcing us. The other piece of that is, although we're a nation primarily of small, medium enterprises, we do have a number of multinationals, but most of those multinationals are European or U.S. Parent. And the European parents, because they have been forced to adopt technologies to increase their productivity, to lower their energy demand, to lower their overall carbon intensity, those parents are starting to force the industries here in Canada, who are their subsidiaries or child companies, to adopt those same technologies, or at least take measures to reduce their own carbon footprints. So we're kind of getting it from both angles, but in essence, it's going to force Canadian companies to increase their productivity and support or result in global competitiveness.
So just a term. So you said SMEs or SMEs and MNEs.
Yeah.
So small and medium enterprises. And then were those multinational enterprises,
Correct.
MNEs?
Yeah.
Okay. When you were saying just shifting from selling to the US to selling elsewhere in the world, I was thinking, well, that's not innovation. That's just changing your markets. But then you talked about, if you want to get into the European market, which is a higher end market, would in theory be a desirable market, it will require some innovations to meet with European standards. And I often feel like we're averse to that. We're thinking, this is what we grow, you can take it or leave it. And Europeans, they're going to leave it. But if we want that market, we kind of have to listen to what they're asking for. And I guess with some pushback, there's always negotiation. And I think, but our default in Canada, especially in agriculture, is that the US is not going to buy it. Then we're going to go sort of steadily down the line of people who just take whatever you got, but they're price sensitive.
Yep.
But if we want to go up the line, that's where we're going to have to innovate. And I say, okay, well, this is interesting. So from a communications perspective, or how would you inspire industries and even farmers to look at these sort of innovative or higher end markets rather than taking sort of the easy sell route, if I could say that?
I think it goes back to productivity and competitiveness. You want to decrease farmers, producers, whether they are forest or ag, producers or fisheries and marines, they want to reduce their overall costs, right? And those costs are going to be based on inputs. They're going to be based on what it costs to harvest, what it costs to produce, process, ship, etc. So if we are looking at European economies that are forcing these producers to better understand their carbon inputs, their carbon footprints, their carbon intensity, they're automatically going to, in order to do that, they're going to need to adopt and adapt technologies within their existing business. That's going to naturally increase their productivity, lower their costs, giving them an advantage over their neighbors, or giving them an advantage over another producer or processor. So that's ultimately increasing their global competitiveness. It's a win-win, and it's a matter of changing the outlook and, frankly, even the culture within our resource-based sectors, and hopefully within our line departments that are supporting research, innovation, and commercialization within these sectors.
I'm curious about this. So is there a parallel universe somewhere in which Canada isn't a reactionary economy, where we could have seen all of this and led in a way? And then And then in addition to that, does Canada have the component parts to do that?
Canada really could easily take the lead, and maybe we will 30 years from now or 50 years from now. And I say that with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek and trepidation at the same time, because we are the only ones that have all the components, all the parts. We have all the assets. We have the crops, we have the forests, we have the water, we have the oceans. We are not being impacted to the same respect by climate. I mean, we are, but we're not dealing with the same hurdles that, California, Texas, or even Spain. I mean, 2 weeks where it was over 45 degrees, like people dying in their homes, right? We don't have a population crisis. If anything, we actually need to increase our population to help increase the productivity that we've got in this country. So we have all of the pieces of the puzzle to grow a sustainable economy, and we're the only ones. Europe does not. I mean, we've already got 85% of our grid that's green, clean, and renewable. So we're the only ones in the world with that kind of an energy grid. We're the only ones in the world who have excess land that can be cultivated. We're the only ones in the world who do not even get close to harvesting on our allowable cut from a sustainable forestry perspective. Like, we've got more than 10% of the world's sustainable forests, and we harvest less than 2% of them on a yearly basis. So we have the pieces of the puzzle. We just need the leadership. We need the understanding of what the opportunity looks like to be able to execute and do something about it. And frankly, if we don't, I think what we're going to see more of is inward investment from European and US entities coming into Canada, which can be great from an economic development perspective, but that is not going to be Canadian IP. So it's going to be come, take, export, and move on.
How do we fix that? We're smart enough. We're just, what is government in the way, or is it our mentality or our approach in the way? What is the issue?
Yeah,
here?
I think it's a few things. I don't think government's in the way. I think we just need the leadership to be able to understand where the gaps are and then how to connect the dots. And we need a culture shift at the same time. We're sitting pretty in this country. We don't have that urgency. I mean, how many of us can take a Friday off on a summer, make a summer long weekend happen without any real consideration of, does it really matter?
Yeah.
Does anybody care? I can tell you that, from a government perspective, as an organization that works a lot with government, I have a lot of respect for our civil service. But I know that when August hits, I will not be able to get a meeting with anybody. It doesn't matter what level within a line department they happen to be. It is just constant out of office replies for the entire month. Nothing happens in August. We might as well be dealing with academic institutions where once May hits, you're not going to get a hold of anyone until late September, early October. Like, everything comes to a halt or a standstill. So we need the leadership, we need the culture shift, we need the vision, and we need to be able to tie the leadership to the vision, create a culture shift within our government entities, both provincial and federal, to see this real opportunity and to turn Canada into a leader.
So you asked your question, but I have a leadership question, but you go first, Toban.
Okay. I have a two-part question.
Okay,
So
that's good. Go for
you're
it.
giving me the mic for a while here. No, I'm just kidding. Just to tie this into extension and kind of your role and your activities in that field, what has worked for you, and what do you see being an effective approach, extension related? And then the second part of that is, what can the three of us do in terms of an action item taking away from this? What can the three of us do to help break down these silos?
Excellent.
Those are challenging questions. In terms of what the three of us can do, harp on the communication side of things. It blows my mind how few folks really understand the assets that we have in this country, and not just ag and forestry and fisheries and marine that I keep kind of harping on, but we have stranded assets, and we have assets like ports. I mean, there's 500 ports in this country, maybe only a dozen or 15 of them that are sort of nationally recognized ports, but another few hundred smaller ports that we can leverage with regards to moving feedstock, moving biomass, moving product, keeping our economy going. Communication to increase awareness of what those opportunities look like around economic development enablers and economic development organizations within our provincial and federal governments, because the conversations that I've had with federally, with finance and treasury, with folks within ISED, they understand where that knowledge exists, but they don't access it. So only when there's a need, when they need something explained, do they reach out to maybe the NRC or NSERC or one of the other sort of science and technology-based entities. But apart from that, finance and treasury responsible for where all the money goes, who gets access to it, how it gets delivered, and then the economic development mandate falling within ISED. Yet, if we go back to what the hell's the foundation of our economy in this country, oil and gas, forestry, agriculture, fisheries and marine, and that's it. And those pieces of our economy don't fall under the purview of ISED and don't fall under the purview of the regional development agencies across our country. So we need to better connect. We need to better communicate. We need to open the eyes of folks within our government, and we need that leadership and the vision to be able to connect all of those dots.
So it's almost like,
it's awesome.
It's almost like we've assumed that these primary industries don't need our investment in innovation. We're going to innovate somewhere else down the stream in manufacturing or whatever, and we're kind of given up on the core of our economy. And in terms of innovation priority, I think that's so fascinating. And so just to bring it back to agriculture, so how do you said there's no mandate for innovation or economic development, no mandate for economic development, which I've brought up now twice within Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And then you mentioned leadership. And then you also spoke somewhat highly of the government. So I'm going to wrap those three things together. So how do we make Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada a leader within agriculture? And maybe that's changing the mandate to include economic development. But how do we get that agency to be dragging agriculture forward?
I would really love to see them expand on their cluster models. So they've got agri-side-based clusters, which are really focused around R&D, and they've been running these for about 15 years. Maybe 20, but definitely 15. And they've been successful at that early stage identification and somewhat validation around some of these technologies. So coming out of academic institutions, maybe there's an early adopter, but the technology isn't completely validated, and it's definitely not at a commercial scale. But building upon that to commercialize and actually scale up, a further focus down that pathway would be grand. And frankly, there isn't really anyone that does that. There's an assumption that industry is going to take it after it's been semi-validated, and they're going to put the investment in. First of all, they're going to be able to identify it. They're going to want to adopt it. They're going to put the investment in to adopt it, and they're going to take all the risk to do it. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen within the culture in Canada. It certainly doesn't happen within the business culture in Canada. So we need funding, whether it's AFC, whether it's a mix of AFC and NRCan, or it's a new national type program, like a Building Canada program that's all about commercializing these technologies here in Canada and helping them scale. and helping them scale in Canada with early adopters and adopters in general along these value chains. So we need manufacturers in Canada to adopt the IP and the technology that's being created here in Canada. And if that means de-risking it from a procurement perspective from government, then we should be initiating those incentives. If it means putting ICTs in place to de-risk the business environment to allow these technologies to grow and to allow those early adopters to invest in these technologies and take them on, then so be it. I mean, why it takes 5 years to develop a tax credit in this country is beyond me, and why we can't have tax credits that are cross-sectoral in nature as opposed to, we're going to do clean tech and it's only going to be available for solar and wind. It's like, well, wait a second. Clean tech could involve ag, it could involve forestry, it could involve fisheries. Oh no, wind and solar only. And it's like, well, why would we not want to create a business environment within this country that allowed IP to succeed, Canadian IP to succeed, and incentivize the SMEs and the M&Es within our backyard to actually adopt that technology and prove it here, so that it gains market traction that can then grow in global opportunities.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Meaghan, what are ICTs?
Investment tax credits. Sorry, ITCs.
Oh,
Yeah.
ITCs. Okay, gotcha. Okay. We have to wrap. I feel like
This is the tip of the iceberg.
I know. I want a part 2 of this someday, maybe season 3. Meaghan, thank you so much. I loved getting to meet you by Zoom or whatever we're doing here today. I love it, and you've got some great ideas for pushing Canada forward. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Do you like what you're hearing and want to support the Extensionists? If you are an agriculture company or association looking for a powerful way to get your message in front of Canadian farmers, then partner with us. Our listeners are farmers from coast to coast.
When you advertise with us, your brand isn't just another commercial break. It becomes part of our story. Ads on the Extensionists are personal and trusted. Our listeners value what they hear on the podcast.
Whether you're looking for a 60-second ad somewhere throughout the podcast, or even an exclusive episode sponsorship, we have options that will work for you.
So if you're ready to get your message out there and connect with farmers across Canada, let's talk. Visit theextensionists.com for more information.
Toban, fantastic conversation. I love talking with Meaghan. She's got a fire in her.
Oh yeah,
soft spoken.
Yeah,
but there's some energy there that I think the country really needs,
and just a wealth of information.
Yeah,
and just her perspective on how this all works, how all the pieces, like components, right? Like she's been interested in components her whole life, her whole career, and you can see it, right?
Yeah.
And what a resource to draw from. That she has a picture of how these pieces all fit.
Yeah.
That's quite something.
What was your key takeaway?
My key takeaway was how what she sits on, the well of information she sits on, is one that I think very few people know about. And then the second one would be, I like when I asked her about what it would take for Canada to not be a reactionary economy anymore. She said, we have the component parts. We have the components to lead. And very few other countries do, but we have it.
Yeah.
And I think...
no urgency.
I think that, so with these other elements, we could.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are my...
But to your question, though, she did say communications.
She did. So when I asked her how can we change that? How can we become that? What steps should we take? And it was an emphasis on communications, like communicating. And then she said, communicate our current assets, but also our stranded assets.
Yeah.
Right. Which was interesting. I mean, I've never heard that phrase before, but and then she went to ports.
Yeah.
And talked with the hundreds of ports that very few
ports.
people know about, and that they are to talk about them as economic drivers,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Like in my mind, every single Canadian needs a lesson in productivity and economic development, and
Right.
a response, and then a response. It almost has to be part of our civic responsibility.
right.
Like, what are we doing to, if not contribute ourselves, open the door to economic development?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so my key takeaway is this: Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has no mandate for economic development. It has a mandate for research, but boy. And it comes back to like the old agronomy. Agronomy is agriculture plus economics, right? And I think if we can slot economics into almost every part of our society, including Ag Canada, like every research project needs to show, okay, how is this going to help make farmers more money, or help make processors more money, or reduce costs, et cetera, increase profit. And I think that sort of economic development mandate, if it came from the top at Ag Canada, would be so helpful. So my key takeaway, and I'm going to start making some phone calls, is how do we get a mandate shift at Agriculture and Ag-Food Canada to think about economic development? And if not, coming up with the ideas themselves, then at least making it easier for the researchers to talk about it, and for agriculture in general to be thinking about that. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good one. I think we could take a little bit of what she has said, or we could draw from this interview and create things in terms of like a really practical approach even to this podcast. Like create materials based on this and focus them at AAFC or at the people who need to hear these things, right?
We're gonna call them silo busters, and it's gonna be like a rocket launcher that fires this thing into these silos and blows them up.
Or we could be dressed up like Mythbusters, kind of, but we're
silo busters. Yeah,
silo busters.
Okay, well, so this is our next live presentation. Will be the silo busters.
Yes, we'll come in uniform. That's right.
This has been the Extensionists podcast. I'm Jay Whetter,
and I'm Toban Dyck.
Till next time. This has been a Burr Forest Group production.
We also want to thank the people working behind the scenes to make this podcast happen.
Abby Wall is our producer and editor.
Ashley Robinson is our coordinator.
And Michelle Holden is our designer.